Hello, my name is Robin Smart, and I'm honored to be your host for this Learning About Dementia series. As the education coordinator for the Alzheimer's Society Guelph Wellington, I truly know the value of learning about dementia if you, a family member, or anyone you know is affected. This series wouldn't be possible without the generous funding of the Guelph Community Foundation. Their support has allowed us to bring this series to you, and the Alzheimer's Society is sincerely grateful to the Guelph Community Foundation. We also extend thanks to the Village of Arbor Trails, who allowed us a location and provided refreshments for each of the sessions. But the biggest thanks goes to you for watching this DVD. There are 6 DVDs in the series, and although they build on each other, each one is designed to stand alone as well. We encourage you to watch all 6 in the series, but you can jump ahead to a topic that is of particular interest or really pertinent to you in your situation right now. After watching the DVDs, we encourage you to be in touch with our office for further education opportunities or to talk to one of our social workers. This DVD considers approach, and it suggests tips and ideas to make daily life and interactions easier both for the person with dementia and their partner in care.
So let's get into approach is everything. I think this is key. I think the title sums it up. We can set ourselves and the person that we support up for success, or we can make it a little more challenging for ourselves and that person. And it really boils down to our approach and our willingness to maybe change old habits and take on some new opportunities. So, caring isn't easy. That's an understatement. I recognize that I am preaching to the choir here. Dementia is a hard disease. It's hard for the person that has it. It's hard for anybody who cares about the person who has it. It comes with a lot of baggage. It comes with fear and confusion and frustration and anger and depression and anxiety and continual losses. And it's really hard to provide care sometimes because you don't always get thanks. You are often resisted in your efforts. People have variable abilities, so it can be a challenge. But I really, really commend you. I thank you, and I honor you for coming out today and trying to learn more, to change approach, because what you do every day, every interaction is vitally important. You truly hold quality of life in your hands. And so your approach can make a difference between success and less success. And that's what the next session is all about. So, see the person, not the disease. This is a picture of the postcard that I just held up for you a couple of minutes ago. This is the focus. It's the message from the Alzheimer's Society Canada, but it's the message that's given to us by people with the disease who say, I'm still here, see me, include me, let me participate in my life. This is a quote from a woman named Marilyn Truscott. Marilyn is a Canadian. She is no longer with us, but I did have the privilege of meeting her a few years ago, and I've seen a couple of speeches, video that Marilyn had made as a person with dementia. She found purpose in life becoming an advocate. And she said, please accept us as we are. We are still the same person inside, but now with new and changing challenges. And I think that's pretty much what it is. So we've done a lot of the medical piece, and this is really going to be a non-medical talk this afternoon. So let's look at the non-medical definition of dementia. Dementia is a shift in the way a person experiences the world around them. You might remember that was the last slide I left you with last week, hoping you'd come back to hear more. And this is where we're going to pick up now. People with dementia engage in the world as they view it now. And what does that really mean for us? Well, this is what it means. You have to expect the unexpected. There will be good days and bad days. There will be good times of day and less good times of day. And no 2 days are necessarily the same. We often think when we talk about progressive diseases, and any form of dementia is a progressive disease, we think in linear terms, and we think of a line that's a straight line out. But it doesn't work that way. Overall, that is the general trajectory. Over time, people function with less ability. But getting on that line is not straight. It goes up and it curves and it comes back and it steps forward and it moves. It is not a linear line. That is the trajectory, but there will be humps and bumps and back and forth and loop and circle as it goes. So you can't assume that because somebody did or didn't do something in the morning that they will or won't do it in the afternoon. Things can change from time of day and day to day. So just be aware of that. Everybody has a truly unique journey. The disease is going to affect people differently. The order in which symptoms appear, the length of each stage, that varies from person to person. And I said it earlier, it bears saying again, when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person. And so you really need to know that if Uncle Fred had dementia and now Aunt Martha has dementia, the journey might not look exactly the same. We all have the RHB designation. And I hope you realize that I'm not insulting you when I call you an RHB. Everybody in this room, I'm an RHB, we're all RHB. Stands for real human beings. And the disease sometimes makes people think, there's a problem, and we stop seeing people as real human beings. And I'm here to encourage you not to get stuck on the disease and the losses, but to focus on remaining abilities. The gentleman earlier had asked about his mom, who has a very short time loop, and I had the honor of meeting his mother a few months ago, and she was meeting and greeting me at the door and asking me, hello, and do you have children, and have you lived in Guelph very long? Glad to meet you. Hello, do you have children? I think that what we can do is try to see an opportunity. I think she would make a great hostess. I think to come to something within her sphere where she lives, if there is a social opportunity for her to interact, to meet and greet with people, and then move her to the next person and have that same conversation, and move her to the next person and have that same conversation. Let's try to find how we can turn something that seems so negative. Let's find what folks can still do. So if social skills are still intact, let's work with that. We're all real human beings, no matter what our deficits are. So no matter how unique the journey, it's really important to remember that everybody on this journey is an adult. We might be giving help to people similar to the help that we would give a young child. But everybody that goes down this journey is an adult, and we need to treat them in that way. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Kansas study. I call it the Kansas study. It probably has a very fancy name, but it was done in Kansas a few years ago. And what they did is they went into a home and they got permission from 31 families to videotape for 6 weeks interactions between the staff members and the person with dementia. And the people with dementia varied in their levels of ability. There were some people that just needed some cueing and reminding, and there were some people who were actually mute, they were no longer speaking, and they needed total care. So at the end of the 6 weeks, they analyzed the tapes, and there are some quotes here that I think are pretty telling. So I don't usually read slides, but I think the words of the researchers speak for themselves. Even those who may seem deeply disoriented or cognitively impaired disliked being patronized or treated as if they are children. A sense of adult identity remains intact in people with dementia, even when individuals aren't able to remember how old they are, where they are, what day it is, or which family members are alive and present. We really need to remember that we are talking always to adults. It was interesting. They looked at they call them nursing aides, we'd call them PSWs. PSW being a personal support worker. When nursing aides communicated in a kind of baby talk for seniors, using a high-pitched sing-song tone, comments like good girl, diminutives like honey, and language that assumed a state of dependency, are we ready for our bath, Alzheimer's patients were twice as likely to resist their efforts to help. So we really need to be aware of keeping any communication we do adult to adult. Simplified but not baby talk, adult to adult. Inviting, not commanding or demanding. So how can we do it? We set the stage, and really I would encourage you to try to eliminate noise wherever possible. Noise is one of the worst triggers for folks with dementia because they're truly unable to decide what they need to filter out, how can they eliminate and just focus on what they need to concentrate on. It's very overwhelming. So if you can turn off the radio or the TV, if you can try to avoid really loud situations or multiple noises at once or distractions in the background if you're going to have a conversation, I would encourage you to try to communicate in as quiet an environment as possible. I'm certainly going to encourage you to slow down. We mentioned this earlier, more pauses for processing. Try to move more slowly. Try to budget more time than you ever think necessary. And try to schedule things for a good time of day for the person. Might not be your good time of day, but if they are a morning person, then if you have something important to do, try to do it in the morning if that's when they're most able and most happy to do things with you. Budgeting more time, you might think it takes 2 minutes to put on your coat and get to the door. If you're working with somebody that has dementia, I would give myself 10 minutes to put on the coat and get to the door. There'll be questions, there'll be pauses, there'll be checks, there'll be looking for something, you want to do things slowly and calmly, so give yourself lots of time to do things. Here's the quote of the day, Sandra Dunn. Stepping out of our reality and into theirs means accepting that our clock runs way too fast. It is not they who should cooperate with us, but we who should cooperate with them. So we need to slow ourselves down to whatever their top speed is. Try to be a healing presence. That's really being consciously and compassionately in the moment with somebody. Join the journey. That's what we say, join their journey. Be with them wherever they're at in that moment. In order to be present, we often have to stop ourselves from multitasking. We have to really be in tune with what that person is saying and focus and give them our undivided attention to meet them where they're at. Often offer unconditional positive regard. Stephen Post, who wrote The Moral Challenge of Alzheimer's, we had Dr. Post up to speak here a few years ago, and he says, when you meet others in the moment, accepting them exactly as they are, you prepare the way for them just to be, without pretension, and without excuse. You relate to them out of the belief they're doing the best they can at this time. So that's kind of a guiding philosophy. And really, we can't prepare for every single situation we might come up against, but we can prepare ourselves by having an overarching thought process about our interactions. And this would be a good thought process to keep in mind. I don't know if any of you will get a mug that says, I'm not always right, I'm just never wrong, at Christmas. Somebody might give you one. We often want to be right. We know we're right. We want to validate ourselves by proving we're right. But if you can, when you are working with somebody who has dementia, resist the need to be right. In the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? Is it going to matter 5 days, 5 months, 5 years from now? Think about letting go of being right. This is right on the same line, the don't argue piece. Idiosyncratic memories. We each remember the same event in a different way. I often find it fascinating when we go out and I'm with my husband and he starts talking about the days when we're courting. And I sit back And I listen to the tales he's telling, and I think, was it me? Is he remembering taking me to this place? I don't remember it this way. I don't remember that restaurant. I don't particularly remember this story at all. Which one of us is wrong? And we've only been married 23 years. I mean, we're only going back a couple of decades in time here, folks. And he's remembering one way and I'm remembering the other. It's actually quite a fascinating thing. So if that happens between two people who are fairly intact, can you imagine the divergent memories between somebody who maybe is considered more healthy and somebody who has a dementia? They can be quite wide, and I would say let go of things that are problems. There's a slide here on idiosyncratic memories. I'll just tell you a little story about a family and the couple. The wife had dementia, the husband did not. The wife had Alzheimer's disease. The husband had been a tennis player, and he had been a very, very good tennis player, and he had many trophies. He had won a lot of things playing tennis. And as time marched on, the wife knew that tennis was important, and she started telling people that she won all these trophies. Wait a minute, she was not the tennis player in the family. It was very hard for this gentleman to understand that it really didn't matter, that anybody who could read the name on the trophy and would know that he was the champion, and to just let that go, to not be constantly correcting. She managed to remember that there were trophies and that tennis was important and that winning was involved. She just made it that she won, and that was just a misprocessing piece. So often memories are not going to jive, and I'm going to encourage you to let go of problems when they don't line up together. Ignoring mistakes. Can we let go of perfection? This one, the gentleman says, my shirt's broken because he can't get the buttons done up the right way. So I encourage you, try to let go about mistakes. Just ignore things. Say goodbye to quizzing. We went through this earlier. Avoid questions that rely on short-term memory. That's okay when you're having conversations maybe with other friends and family members, but not so good if somebody has a memory impairment. When talking, it's best to talk about one thing at a time. Stay on one topic at a time. When talking, I encourage you to talk in generalities. Something where there is no right or wrong answer. Often things in the here and now, as I mentioned earlier, are a good starting place. Generalities can be anything. I've put a few different pictures up here on the slide. It can be the chipmunks you saw storing nuts because we're getting really close to Old Man Winter coming in a serious way. It can be talking about a trip you had and a beautiful scene you saw. Or something, the warplane there. I just came back a few weeks ago from a trip to the Warplane Heritage Museum down in Hamilton. It might be something in general that people can relate to. When talking, the past might be best because often people lose their recent memories, but for the longest time, things that happened in the past are quite intact. Old memories around firsts are often intact for a long time because there are stories that are told over and over. They're stories that are rehearsed that way, and they have a certain emotional connotation to them. Your first car, your first job, maybe your first kiss. Go back and talk about whatever that person has access to. You can talk about observations, what you see. We're Canadian. Anybody who lives in Canada has got to be able to talk about the weather. You know, there's always something in the environment. If you're bored with what's in the room, go down the hall, look at something else. Talk about what you're seeing, your observations. Talk about your feelings in those observations. Who was with you? Tell a story and maybe it'll stimulate somebody else's story. You can certainly talk about your own stories and your feelings and adventures you had, and it might trigger something. If you start a story, though, and somebody with dementia pitches in with their story, drop yours. Let yours go. Go with theirs. Talk wherever they're at. You can always come back to yours if you need to. The holidays are coming up, and I'm sure there will be some occasions where there will be family gatherings, and perhaps the person with dementia will be at a table where there are a number of people, and they'll be talking perhaps about current events, something that maybe the person with dementia will have a hard time relating to or interacting with. I encourage you, if the person speaks up and says something, stop that current conversation. Have whatever conversation the person wants to have, and then go back and pick up where you left off, because you can hold in your memory bank what was said and what you want to finish saying. The person with dementia can't hold their thoughts until you're finished your conversation. So if somebody does get stimulated and starts to tell a story, go with them for a while, then go back and pick up where you left off. When communicating, I said this earlier, the nonverbal communication trumps all. Your gestures, your tone of voice, your expression, your nonverbal and your verbal totally need to match. And I'm going to suggest that shared activities are certainly something you can do. Shared activities do not have to have a particular goal. You don't feel that you have to accomplish something. It's just something you're enjoying doing together. One of the things that I often do with people at the end of the year is I collect old calendars. I usually put a call out. I stand up at church and I say, I want all your old calendars from last year. If you have attractive calendars, because often people will spend 25 or 30 bucks on a beautiful calendar with stunning pictures on it. Those can be great talking points. I have a gentleman who's just nuts about trains, really loves trains. And some of those train calendars have beautiful pictures. So you're not looking at the dates, you're not looking at the words, you're looking at the photo part of it. Great stimulation, great things to share and talk about if you have nothing else. Abandon rigid agendas. I encourage this strongly. If you're going to visit somebody, please don't go in with a totally rigid agenda. You want to simplify your visits. Consider the goal of doing anything. I hope that the goal would be to share some pleasant time together as opposed to accomplishing something that you can walk out with at the end of the day. So finishing is not always necessary. If you're doing something and you're both having a good time doing it, then it's a success. You sit down to play dominoes with somebody and they aren't playing dominoes, they're building a little house out of the squares. As long as you're both having a good time doing it, that's what matters. You don't have to do things right per se, you have to do things mutually happily. Learning to have a supportive attitude. This is a hard one sometimes because I know that we carry our own pain about what's going on, but wherever possible, stay positive. I'm going to encourage you to try to avoid saying no, don't, shouldn't, can't, mustn't, stop. We start a lot of sentences that way sometimes when we're interacting with somebody that has a dementia. And can you imagine how it feels to hear no, don't, shouldn't, stop, mustn't all the time? It can be quite wearing. It's hard on the self-esteem. So maybe you could try, well, how about? You're stopping, you're interrupting the activity, but in a more positive way. How about we try this? How about we do the other? I have an idea. There's an interruption. I have an idea. It doesn't say no, don't stop. It's a more positive way of cutting something off before you're moving on to something else. Or let's do it together. Maybe there's a more positive way to bring your message to folks. And really encourage focus on remaining strengths. What can the person still do? Often the ability to enjoy humor and music remain throughout the disease process. Language gets damaged very early, unfortunately, particularly in Alzheimer's and some of the FTDs and frontotemporal dementias. but the place that we do music in our brains is in a different space than the language center. And so the ability to participate in and enjoy music remains for a very, very, very long time. There are some clips, and you might even access these on YouTube, that show people who have been fairly unengaged and non-responsive who are given iPods with music that would be significant to them, and they put the earphones on, and the person who's sitting there literally lights up, listens to the music, starts to move to the music, and then actually when they take the iPod off and converse with this person, speaks and speaks in an animated and positive way. So there's all sorts of research that's being done on the value of music. Many places have music therapists. I'm not a very good, in fact, I'm a ghastly singer. I can't say I'm not very good. I'm absolutely ghastly. I'm a really bad singer. And my family, who loves me, won't even let me sing. That's how bad it is. But having said that, I found that if I had people who were upset or not wanting to do something, if I sang to them some song that meant something to them, they calmed down, they would come with me, they would engage with me. And I encourage you to get over whatever anybody has ever said about your singing. And if you can sing with somebody, you will find a new door opening to interaction and positive communication. So there are 3 things you can do to help somebody. And there she is with her hand behind her ear, because it's all about listening. You can listen, listen, and listen. That's from the art of being a healing presence. We listen more, we actually communicate more. I'm going to go back to suggesting you want to avoid confrontation. When a person with Alzheimer's disease seems confused or agitated, the best way to diffuse a situation is to validate their feelings, whether it's a feeling of anger or confusion or frustration or suspicion, or I would encourage you just to hear whatever emotion is pouring out from them, name that emotion. Boy, you seem mad, or you seem so sad. Whatever the emotion is, name it, acknowledge it. You can't move on, unfortunately, until you've dealt with whatever the feeling is that that person has. You'll never be able to get them on to something else unless you dissipate that emotion. They can only hold one thought at a time, and if that emotion has got them, then you need to name it, dissipate it, reassure them, and then you can move on. So we talked about this just a tiny bit earlier, validation versus reality orientation. Validation is always supporting the meaning behind words. It's not that you agree or disagree. Find out what they're saying. Where are they at? Encourage them to speak more to you. And what you can do is you can simply offer to hear them and then support them. I will check into that. I will find out about that. You don't have to solve things in an instant, but they need to be heard. And this is the order. If you're going to validate somebody, if you're going to be effective, really has to happen in this order. You focus on the emotional aspect of the message. You acknowledge that emotional content of the message. That's the validate piece. Then you can go on to reassure, and then you can go on to distract or redirect to something else. And that's really about offering empathy, isn't it? Truly hearing somebody else. And empathy is the conscious and intuitive attempt to know without judgment, as accurately as possible, what the other person is experiencing. So if we can focus on empathizing with somebody, that's usually pretty useful. This quote, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes," speaks to the ability of us to let go of the way we've been seeing and expecting somebody to do something, and looking with softer eyes at the situation. Proust, I think, put it quite eloquently, and it's us who need to change. It's often our voyage of discovery, and we might surprise ourselves how patient we can be, how open we can be, how we can learn and change. Because there are 4 major universal needs. And I think if I could see you, your heads would be nodding. To feel needed and useful. As human beings, that is mandatory for us. Above and beyond. These are the needs beyond shelter, food, air, those sorts of things. To have an opportunity to care for something or someone. That's why horticulture, pets are so vital and important, particularly with people who have dementia. To have one's self-esteem boosted, where people can still participate, where we solicit an opinion, where we have them support us and help us in some way, where we let go of those no, don't, must, shouldn'ts as much as possible, and to give and receive love. Whenever I don't put this slide up, whenever I ask people, what do you think we need above and beyond our physical requirements, love is right up there. That's the first one everybody puts their hand up for. We all need love, and we never, ever stop needing that. And unfortunately, the person with dementia might not look like they're loving you back, but I am certain, in my 30 years working in long-term care, I am certain that it made a difference when people came and visited and interacted with folks, even when they couldn't articulate back so much. They did an interesting study with people who were in late-stage dementia and who were no longer verbal. These were people who had lost the power of speech and appeared very flat. You didn't really have any facial expression anymore. And the scientists showed them pictures of family members and pictures of strangers. And there was absolutely no outward change or expression change on these people's faces. So how do we know that it made a difference? Because they had been rigged up with some electrodes that measured their galvanic skin response and their immunoglobulin response. And there was a distinct difference when they showed them pictures of family versus pictures of strangers. So you might not see it, but it's still in there. Maya Angelou, I'm sure you have all heard, very, very famous woman and poet. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that is a true, true way people with dementia live. They might forget that you had a conversation about something, but they will know that they felt good in the moment with you. And the ability to retain that good feeling stays after you've gone away. If, though, you go in and you're arguing over the reality of something, they will feel upset, and that upset feeling will remain long after they've forgotten what the argument was about. So the ability to leave people with good emotions, that is doubly true with folks that have dementia. So in summary, we want to set people up for success. We want to consider the words and the sentences that we're using. Do they sound as if they're telling the person what to do or what not to do? We want to keep in mind that we're obviously still communicating with an adult who, at least in the early and the mid stages, may still be trying to maintain a sense of control. We really need to honor and support that. We might want to be cautious about starting conversations with you need to, or you can't, or I want you to. Because those conversations can really escalate any sort of agitation that may be brewing. You want to pay attention to that nonverbal, your tone of voice, your gestures, your body language. Remembering that the person with dementia no longer has the ability to be rational or logical in the way they could before the disease. And they can't be rational and logical to the extent that you can be. So I would avoid going down that route. And arguing with the person usually makes the situation worse. One writer summed it up, it's the disease, not the person. And I know some families use that as their mantra. So we are here at the Alzheimer's Society to offer a lot of services to support people with dementia and people who care about people who have dementia. And our services are free, certainly thanks to donations and fundraising. We can offer support groups for people with dementia and for their caregivers, one-to-one support. And again, all you have to do is look at the back of those brochures, call our office, ask for an appointment with the social worker. They will make sure that you get an appointment set up. And if you're in a panic situation, you can call and say, you know what, I can't wait for my appointment. I need to talk to somebody. There will be somebody on call. They can even put you through to an on-call social worker if you're in a bit of a crisis situation. If for some reason you can't access the Alzheimer's Society because something is happening outside of office hours, and we are supposed to be a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, well, 9 to 4:30 sort of place, you can call Telehealth. Now, everybody's probably heard about Telehealth, but this is what's new. It started October the 8th. They now have special counselors at the other end of the telehealth line specifically for families who are dealing with dementia situations. So if it's outside of office hours and you need to call for some help and you end up calling Telehealth, tell them that it is a dementia, be sure you use the word dementia or Alzheimer's situation, and they will transfer you not to the regular RN, but to a specialized RN who can then give you particular service. So remember that between 4:30 in the afternoon and 9 in the morning if the wheels come off. We also offer all sorts of education programs, the Medic Alert Safely Home program, resource libraries, public forums. We have a volunteer companion program that's all about friendly visiting. We have newsletters, and you can contact us for any of those services. As I said, the information is on the back of your brochure.